The beach house was quiet. Too quiet for two people who were supposed to be rebuilding something. It had these big glass doors that opened straight onto the sand. No neighbors, just the sound of waves and silence between us. We booked it hoping the ocean would somehow do the talking we'd been avoiding. But from the moment we arrived, it felt like a pause, not a fresh start. Like we were waiting for something neither of us had the courage to admit. My wife spent most of her time on work calls. She'd walk around the patio with her phone to her ear, nodding at no one, talking to clients like she hadn't just spent the last 3 nights sleeping with her back to me. I stopped trying to reach her a while ago. At first, it was little things. She started finishing dinner early. Started saying, "I'm tired," before I even opened my mouth. Started scrolling through her phone while I talked. I don't think she meant to push me away. I think she just stopped noticing I was there. And me? I got quieter. I stopped asking her to meet me halfway. Stopped reaching for her hand. Stopped hoping. That's the version of me that stood in that beach house kitchen the moment she walked in. Her name is still hard to say. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me of the version of myself I thought I'd buried. The version that still wanted to be seen. Still wanted to be chosen. She was my wife's friend. They'd known each other for years, though they'd grown distant. She was visiting from out of town, spur of the moment, she said. Needed a break. Didn't want to be alone. I found out later my wife had invited her without telling me. Thought it would be nice to have company, but I couldn't help but feel like she was avoiding the silence between us again. And then, there she was. She had this warmth to her. Not loud, not flirty. Just present. She looked you in the eyes when you spoke. Laughed at the things no one else noticed. She noticed me. The first night, we all sat outside by the fire pit, wine in hand, stars above, the ocean just a low hum in the background. My wife dozed off in the lounge chair after her second glass. It was just the two of us still awake. She turned to me and said, "You two look like strangers sharing a bed." She didn't say it to hurt me. She said it like someone who'd lived that sentence before. Someone who knew what that silence between two people really meant. I didn't reply, just stared into the fire. Because she was right. We were strangers. And for the first time in months, I wasn't the only one who saw it. I should have gone to bed that night. But I didn't. I sat there beside her, listening to the waves, saying nothing, because sometimes silence with the right person feels louder than words with the wrong one. And in that moment, under the stars, beside a woman who wasn't mine, I felt more seen than I had in my own marriage in over a year. That's where it started. Not with a touch. Not with a kiss. But with a recognition. And once something is seen, it's hard to unsee it. The beach house was quiet. Too quiet for two people who were supposed to be rebuilding something. It had these big glass doors that opened straight onto the sand. No neighbors. Just the sound of waves and silence between us. We booked it hoping the ocean would somehow do the talking we'd been avoiding. But from the moment we arrived, it felt like a pause, not a fresh start. Like we were waiting for something neither of us had the courage to admit. My wife spent most of her time on work calls. She'd walk around the patio with her phone to her ear, nodding at no one, talking to clients like she hadn't just spent the last 3 nights sleeping with her back to me. I stopped trying to reach her a while ago. At first, it was little things. She started finishing dinner early. Started saying, "I'm tired," before I even opened my mouth. Started scrolling through her phone while I talked. I don't think she meant to push me away. I think she just stopped noticing I was there. And me? I got quieter. I stopped asking her to meet me halfway. Stopped reaching for her hand. Stopped hoping. That's the version of me that stood in that beach house kitchen the moment she walked in. Her name is still hard to say. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me of the version of myself I thought I'd buried. The version that still wanted to be seen. Still wanted to be chosen. She was my wife's friend. They'd known each other for years, though they'd grown distant. She was visiting from out of town, spur of the moment, she said. Needed a break. Didn't want to be alone. I found out later my wife had invited her without telling me. Thought it would be nice to have company, but I couldn't help but feel like she was avoiding the silence between us again. And then, there she was. She had this warmth to her. Not loud, not flirty. Just present. She looked you in the eyes when you spoke. Laughed at the things no one else noticed. She noticed me. The first night, we all sat outside by the fire pit, wine in hand, stars above, the ocean just a low hum in the background. My wife dozed off in the lounge chair after her second glass. It was just the two of us still awake. She turned to me and said, "You two look like strangers sharing a bed." She didn't say it to hurt me. She said it like someone who'd lived that sentence before. Someone who knew what that silence between two people really meant. I didn't reply, just stared into the fire. Because she was right. We were strangers. And for the first time in months, I wasn't the only one who saw it. I should have gone to bed that night. But I didn't. I sat there beside her, listening to the waves, saying nothing, because sometimes silence with the right person feels louder than words with the wrong one. And in that moment, under the stars, beside a woman who wasn't mine, I felt more seen than I had in my own marriage in over a year. That's where it started. Not with a touch, not with a kiss, but with a recognition. And once something is seen, it's hard to unsee it. That night, dinner felt different. The kind of different you don't notice at first, not until you realize you're laughing, and you haven't really laughed in months. It was late. We grilled something simple, fish, maybe. I don't even remember the taste. But I remember the way her laugh cut through the quiet. Not loud, just real. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself leaning in just a little closer than I should have. We sat at the little wooden table on the patio. Candles flickering in the breeze, wine glasses half full. The air smelled like salt and grilled lemon. And something else, something I didn't know how to name yet. My wife had been tired. She barely touched her food. Kept glancing at her phone like it was more important than the moment. She yawned halfway through the meal, stretched, and stood up. "I'm heading in. You two don't stay out too long," she said. And just like that, she was gone. We didn't move. Didn't speak for a second. Just listened to the waves. The silence didn't feel awkward. It felt comfortable. Like she was giving me space I didn't know I needed. She poured another glass of wine. Offered me some. I nodded. And that's when it started. Stories. The kind you don't tell at parties or during small talk. She told me about the time she almost left her job to chase a man who didn't love her back. I told her how I used to write poetry once, before bills, before routines, before I forgot who I was. She laughed at one of my stories, head tilted back, eyes squinting like she meant it. And when she leaned forward to place her glass down, her fingers brushed mine. Just a moment. Just enough. But it was a spark. That quiet, electric kind that doesn't ask for permission. She looked at me. Really looked. Then said, softly, almost like she was afraid to say it too loud, "You don't have to keep pretending, you know. I see you." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't seduction. It was recognition. She saw the tiredness behind my smile. The weight I carried in my silence. The hunger that lived behind my polite nods and daily routines. And in that second, I didn't feel like a husband anymore. Didn't feel like someone trying to hold a crumbling marriage together. I felt like a man. Seen. Heard. Wanted. And that feeling? It didn't come with music swelling or some dramatic pause. It came with quiet. With stillness. With the steady thump of my heart reminding me I was still alive. I should have stood up. Should have thanked her for the company and walked back inside. But I didn't, because deep down, I didn't want the night to end. Not yet. Not while I finally felt like someone saw me again. She wasn't just a guest. She was my wife's friend. And I knew that. Every second I sat out there with her, I knew. But I didn't move, didn't pull back, didn't draw a line. Because something about the way she looked at me made me forget how alone I'd been feeling. And for a few stolen moments, it felt like relief. After she went to bed that night, I stayed outside, stared at the waves until the wind chilled my skin, tried to convince myself nothing had happened. Because it hadn't, right? No kiss, no touch other than her fingers grazing mine. No promises, just words, just connection. But that's the part that kept me up. Because it was real. More real than anything I'd felt in months with the woman I was actually married to. And that made it worse. I laid next to my wife in bed that night, listening to her breathe with her back turned to me, thinking about the conversation I'd just had with her friend. I wanted to reach out, touch her shoulder, pull her closer. But I didn't. Because I didn't want closeness out of duty. I wanted to be wanted. And I couldn't remember the last time I felt that from her. I told myself a lot of things in the days that followed. It's not cheating if nothing happens. I didn't plan this. I just needed someone to talk to, but none of that made the guilt go away. It sat in my chest like a stone, not crushing me, just heavy, always there. Every time I laughed at something she said. Every time I caught myself watching her walk across the room. Every time I felt her eyes linger just a second longer than they should have. I told myself I could handle it, that I was strong enough to keep a boundary. But the truth was, I didn't want to. Not really. And that terrified me. Because even if I hadn't crossed the line yet, I could feel myself walking toward it. One thought at a time. One late-night conversation. One shared joke. One look across the dinner table when my wife wasn't paying attention. And every time she smiled at me like I mattered, it chipped away at the version of myself that used to say, I'd never. The version that still believed love was enough. I started to remember all the small ways things had faded between me and my wife. How she stopped texting me during the day unless it was about groceries. How we sat in the same room for hours without speaking. How we went to sleep facing opposite walls. And I kept thinking, maybe this is what happens to everyone. Maybe marriage is just a slow forgetting. But then why did it feel so wrong to feel something again? Why did it feel so dangerous to be seen? The guilt didn't hit like a storm. It crept in slowly, like fog, blurring the edges of what I believed about myself. And the temptation, it didn't shout. It whispered, with every passing glance. With every good morning that felt warmer than it should. With every little thing that shouldn't have meant anything, but did. I knew I was playing with fire, but for once I didn't feel cold. The shift was so subtle, I could almost pretend it wasn't happening. Almost. It started in the smallest places, a brush of her arm against mine when we passed in the hallway, a laugh that lingered a little too long. A glance held just a second past comfortable. We never said anything. Not out loud. But some things don't need words. Some things live in the space between words, in the stillness, in the silence. One night, my wife went to bed early again. Headache, she said. Didn't even kiss me goodnight. I stayed up, pretending to scroll my phone on the deck, but really, I was just waiting. For what? I don't know. That's when she came outside. Can't sleep? She asked. I shook my head. She smiled, pulled off her sweater, and pointed toward the shoreline. Come swim with me. The beach was empty. The moon was full, casting light on the water like it had something to reveal. We waded in, slowly, the cold catching our breath. The water pulled at our ankles like it knew we were carrying something we couldn't say. We didn't touch. Didn't cross that line. But the air between us was different now. Thicker. Charged. She floated on her back and whispered, Do you ever feel like you missed your life while living it? I wanted to lie. I wanted to say no. But the truth came out too fast. All the time, I said. And just like that, the walls cracked again. She told me about the man she should have married, the baby she almost had. Told me she'd been living on autopilot since her last breakup, smiling through days that all felt the same. I told her I hadn't felt wanted in my own home for over a year. Told her I wasn't even sure who I was without the weight of being her husband. She didn't judge me. She just listened. And in that moment, it felt more intimate than any touch. More dangerous than any kiss. We walked back to the house in silence, dripping wet, each step heavier than the last. I thought that would be it. That we'd wake up the next day, pretend we didn't bare our souls in salt water. Go back to safe distance. To small talk. But the thing about crossing invisible lines is, you don't realize how far you've gone until you try to walk back. A few nights later, it happened. I was in bed. Lights off. Door half shut. I heard the soft creak of the hallway floor. Then, the door opened. Slow. Quiet. She stood there in the doorway. In a loose t-shirt. Hair down. Eyes soft. Smiling. She didn't speak. Didn't ask. Didn't move. She just stood there. Looking at me like I was the only thing in the world she could see clearly. And in that frozen moment, everything in me screamed to get up, to say something, to end whatever was happening between us. But I didn't. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask her to leave. I just laid there, watching her watch me. I should have told her to leave. I didn't. The storm came out of nowhere. 1 minute, the night was still. Waves brushing the shore like a lullaby, air thick and quiet. Then, a sudden crack of thunder, sharp, close. Rain fell like it had been waiting all week to fall. Hard. Unapologetic. The power went out almost instantly. Everything snapped into black. I sat up in bed. The room was warm, humid with the kind of stillness that makes your skin stick to the sheets. I heard the soft sound of footsteps again. That same creak in the hallway. The door eased open. She didn't knock. Didn't hesitate. She slipped inside, her voice a whisper, "Storm's bad." I didn't want to sit alone. I should have told her no. I should have reminded her whose room this was, whose bed this was, but I didn't. She climbed in beside me. Not under the covers. Just laid there, on top of them. Close. But not touching. We didn't speak. Didn't move. Just listened. To the rain. To the thunder. To our own breathing. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. I turned slightly. So did she. We faced each other in the dark. No one made the first move. Not really. It was like the room folded in on itself, shrinking until we were the only two people left in the world. Our faces were inches apart. I could feel the heat of her breath on my skin, the weight of the silence between us. I didn't lean in, but I didn't move away either. And then her lips touched mine. Soft, barely there. Just a second. Just enough to burn. She pulled back almost immediately. Eyes wide. Breath shallow. I could have stopped it right then. I could have said, "What are we doing?" I could have turned over and ended the moment. But I didn't. We just laid there, eyes locked in the dark, suspended in something that felt too fragile to name. We didn't go all the way. Not that night. Not physically. But we crossed something deeper. Something messier. Something that no apology could undo. Because it wasn't about sex. It was about being wanted. Being seen. Being chosen even if only for a second. And that kind of betrayal cuts worse. Because it lives in your chest. Not your body. And just as she sat up, just as her feet touched the floor and she reached for the door, I heard it. My wife's voice in the hallway. A simple, sleepy murmur. "Is someone awake?" I panicked. Not because I was guilty, but because part of me didn't regret it. The morning after didn't feel like morning. It felt like the aftermath of something unspoken, like a storm had passed through and rearranged everything. Without leaving a trace. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was louder than anything I'd heard in days. She was already packed when I stepped into the living room. Hair tied back, hoodie on, eyes calm, but not peaceful. She didn't say much. Just sipped the coffee I didn't even hear her make. I stood by the window, staring at the water like it could undo the night. Then she said it quiet, steady. Tell her if you want. Or don't. But you'll think of me every time she looks away. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I didn't even nod. She set her mug down gently, turned toward the hallway, and with one last glance, she was gone. No door slam. No dramatic goodbye. Just absence. I stood there in the silence she left behind, and everything felt heavier. My wife came out an hour later, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She looked around, confused. Did she leave already? I nodded. Yeah. Said she had an early thing. Didn't want to wake anyone. She didn't respond right away. Just stared at me. That kind of stare that isn't searching for answers, it's confirming suspicions. She walked over to the kitchen, poured herself coffee, then turned and asked, not sharply, not accusing, just quietly, "Did something happen last night?" And I froze. For a second, I thought about telling her the truth. Not everything. Just enough. Enough to explain the look in my eyes. Enough to explain the change she must have felt in the room the moment she stepped into it. But instead, I shook my head. No, that's all I said. No. And something in her eyes broke. Not big. Not dramatic. Just cracked. Like she'd been holding on to the edge of something for too long, and my lie was the final weight. She didn't press. Didn't ask again. She just turned away, took her coffee, and walked out onto the deck. And I stood there, in the kitchen where it all unraveled. In the silence of a truth I couldn't take back. Not because I was afraid of what she'd do, but because I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The man who used to reach for her. The man who used to believe in second chances. The man who would have sworn he'd never be this. But now? Now I was someone else. And she knew. Even if she never said a word again, she knew. The days after felt quiet in a way I didn't know how to live with. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that creeps under your skin, sits heavy on your chest, makes every sound feel louder than it should. The clink of a coffee spoon. The rustle of bed sheets. The silence between two people who know something is wrong but can't name it out loud. I kept asking myself the same questions. Why did I let it happen? Why did she come? Why did it feel so easy to betray someone I used to love? I didn't have answers. Just fragments. Maybe it started long before that weekend. Before the kiss. Before the conversations that turned into confessions. Maybe it started the first time I felt my wife's eyes glaze over while I was talking. Maybe it started the night I reached for her and she shifted away in her sleep. Maybe it started the moment I stopped believing she'd ever see me again. The truth? I've thought about her ever since. Not just the kiss. Not just the room. But the look she gave me before she left. The way she said, "You'll think of me every time she looks away." And God, she was right. I do. Every time my wife sits across from me at dinner, eyes on her phone. Every time we lie in bed, inches apart but miles away. Every time I catch myself wanting to say something real and swallowing it instead. I think about that moment. About her. About how being wanted, even for a second, felt like breathing after holding it in for too long. I know how it sounds. I know it makes me look weak. Selfish. Unfaithful. But that night didn't make me that. It just revealed it. Maybe I wasn't just broken. Maybe I was already gone, and she just found the pieces. Pieces my wife stopped looking for a long time ago. I've stood at the edge of confession so many times since then. I've pictured the words. I need to tell you something. I made a mistake. It wasn't physical, not really. But it was something. But I stop every time. Because I don't know if telling her would heal anything or just burn what little is left. Would it help her understand me more? Or would it just confirm that I became the one thing she was afraid I'd become? Would I be speaking the truth, or just trying to ease my own guilt at her expense? And maybe the cruelest part of it all is knowing that she might already feel the truth, and is choosing not to say it out loud, just like I am. We're both pretending. Her, out of fear. Me, out of shame. And every day we do, the silence between us grows heavier. Like a secret sitting in the center of our marriage. Breathing. Waiting. Have you ever let something in that you knew could destroy everything? Not by accident. Not because you didn't see the danger, but because, in that moment, the silence in your life felt heavier than the risk. Because you were tired of being unseen. Tired of carrying the weight of a love that no longer looked back at you. That's what I keep asking myself. Was I wrong for needing what my wife couldn't give? Or was I just human? I never meant for any of it to happen. But meaning doesn't erase consequence. Intentions don't cancel pain. And now, every time I hear silence in my own home, every time she looks at me like a question she no longer wants the answer to, I wonder, what would have happened if I had just said something sooner? If I had reached for her before someone else reached for me? Tell me in the comments your stories, your regrets, the moments you don't say out loud. I read every single one. No judgment, just truth. Because sometimes that's all we have left. Like this story? Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. Tap the bell, because the next story might be the one you've been too afraid to speak aloud. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper. They wear laughter. They smell like wine and secrets. They look like a friend, smiling across the table. They don't knock down your door. They slip through the cracks you didn't think anyone could see. And sometimes, the deepest wounds aren't the ones we suffer. They're the ones we choose. The ones we invite in with open arms, because for a moment, they feel like salvation. I didn't expect her to join us. But now, I wonder if some part of me always wanted her to. Fade out. Soft music. Waves brushing the shore. A man standing alone. No words left to say. Just silence, and the weight of everything he couldn't take back.